Hello, everyone. My name is Mia, and welcome to your sanity check that is the Google Analytics 4 transition. So, if you in the audience are concerned because your company has not migrated to Google Analytics 4, don't feel alone. Actually, only 30% of websites who have Google Analytics 3 on them have migrated. So, there is a lot of pain in the industry for the migration because Google Analytics 4 is highly complex, but just like with any analytics tool, it does require the talent to get it set up correctly. So, who am I? First, my name is Mia. I am the CEO of Clickvoyant. Clickvoyant is a data analyst as service in an artificial intelligence. So it connects to Google Analytics to bring automated insights to marketers who don't necessarily have an analytics person at their disposal 24/7. But prior to that, I was an analytics director at some of the largest agencies in the world, and my insights have been making it rain for more than a decade for some of the largest Fortune 100 and Fortune 500 brands. So I'm pouring this expertise into mid-cap market because that's where the most pain is due to a lack of analytics talent in the industry. A lot of times, analytics ends up being the side hustle of somebody in the digital marketing team who could be doing more strategic and creative work with their time. So, on to GA4. So, the first thing that we need to know about Google Analytics is what we know of it and what has been live for the last 15 years is over. What you will find in Google Analytics 4, if you've had the pleasure of logging in, is that it is very much designed for an analytics professional to use. A lot of people in the industry ask, oh, I think Google's probably going to push it back, that the July 1 hard date is something that Google will basically cave in to marketer demand. And the reality is that that isn't going to happen. If you've logged into Google Analytics, you can see that the messaging about it turning over on July 1 is increased because there is a timer once you log in. That's basically a countdown to D-Day. The caveat is that those subscribers to Google Analytics 360, which is the premium tool, they will get an entire extra year. So their deadline is July 1, 2024. Now, what I'm going to share with you today is everything that is available now. Something you should be aware of is that Google Analytics 4 changes frequently. And so what is true today may not be true tomorrow. So take this with a grain of salt if you are watching this after the session is over and you see some new information come up. So first thing is like, why do we want Google Analytics in the first place? Why is it necessary for demand gen marketers to understand? The demand gen marketing ecosystem usually consists of lots of digital touch points. When you're in demand gen, you're probably doing things like webinars, email, SMS, event-based marketing to try to nurture leads into the door for what is typically a higher price point, high consideration time period. Now, Google Analytics is really the product of choice for that mid-funnel activity. So when we think of awareness, that's pretty much metrics that are around media campaigns and advertising buys and social media. However, when people get to your website and do things like download white papers, fill out forms, subscribe to the newsletter, those are the things that you can start tracking that will correlate to down funnel sales milestones. And without that level of activity on the website, you lose all this rich information about what your customers like to do when they get to the web. So the main thing that you want to take away if Google Analytics changes is that Google Analytics 3 is pretty much a model home, right? You can walk into it, everything is working as expected. You know where the light switches are, how to turn on the faucet, and it's maybe not exactly your taste, but it'll do. Google Analytics 4 is a house taken down to the studs. So you could have it exactly as you need it, tailored to your business, tailored to your marketing discipline, But yet you will need to hire an architect to get the blueprints, the plumbers, the electricians, the carpenters to make it happen. And that is the level of work and intention that it'll take to get data out of GA4. So some hot takes on the main differences. Number one is the data model. GA3 is a structured data set. That's what makes it so easy and like a model home to drill into and drill out of. GA4 is an unstructured data set. So you might hear things like it's event-based, whereas GA3 is session-based. So to be able to dive in and analyze out is going to be a lot more difficult to do. Now, the other thing to consider is cross-platform tracking. So some of you might have a web application, a mobile application, and a website. Now, Google Analytics 4 tracks users across all of those different devices and platforms and applications in a pretty easy way. This is like the one thing that GA4 gave us that is easy to do. Previously, you had to consider how you're counting users across these different platforms and have to do some tricky tagging to set that up. Now, all you have to do is have the GA4 tag on these different platforms, and it will automatically know who the users are cross-platform. The other feature of GA4 is that it's really built in the back end for AI and ML capabilities. So because the data is unstructured, it also means it's so flexible if you implement it correctly. So all of the AIs that are coming out and machine learning techniques that can be applied to data was hard to do in GA3, now will be easier to do in GA4 if you have that kind of talent to work with. Next is the privacy controls for the user. So part of the reason why July 1 is a hard date is because Google is really prioritizing user privacy. This means that users can create consent modes and have data retention controls in a way that they couldn't in GA3. Next, GA4 has a simplified setup process, which does require fewer steps and can be completed in a few minutes. What I'm talking about is creating the tag and then turning on what is their enhanced tracking. Now, without getting too much into the detail, the enhanced tracking and anything automated does send a lot of data that isn't necessarily tailored to your needs. A prime example, one of the features of GA4 enhanced tracking is automatic tracking of forms. So it automatically detects when a form is visible in the browser, when a user has interacted it, and also auto detects a submit. However, when a user submits and say that there is an error in the field, Google's auto detection says that that's a submission. So in the user experience where a user starts a form, makes an error, submits the form, and then has to resubmit the form with the error corrected, that's two form submits. From a business standpoint, it's one form submit. So that's the thing to take with a grain of salt when we talk about simplified setup. Now, another feature of GA4 is that each custom event has ultimate flexibility compared to GA3. GA3, a typical custom event would be something that was categorized under category action label, 3 dimensions, 1 custom event. In GA4, that custom event can have up to 20 parameters associated to it. So in the example, like say you have a video view, and in video, you would say the category is video, the action is play, click, pause, and the label was the title of the video. You don't have other things like I want to know the length of the video. I want to know a category of the video content. Like all of those parameters were not available to you because you were limited to 3 in the old GA3 systems. So in GA4, you have, again, more flexibility. If you take anything away from GA4 and the unstructured data set, the benefits of that is ultimate flexibility, but that is also why it's going to take a lot of intention and a thoughtful implementation process. So without getting too much in the weeds, let's move on into the types of team members that you're going to need to implement Google Analytics for. Number one, you're going to need the marketing professional. Marketing professional is basically acting as the stakeholder. I need to know these types of things. These are the questions that I come to my desk with every morning. And then the data analyst is able to figure out how they are going to get that data extracted from the system. When the data analyst can set up what the marketer needs to see, then it is up to the tagging engineer to be able to figure out how to architect the data to get it into the GA4 systems so the data analyst can get it out for the marketing professional. Now, I add data scientist here, and I know that that is quite a luxury, but if you have the ability to get the data out, there is more to life than just a dashboard. Actually, research and statistical modeling is what's going to help the demand gen marketer understand what activities people are doing in Google Analytics that are correlated to down funnel lifetime value. So if you have the luxury of having a data scientist on staff, that also is a person that you want to include in the analytics, tagging, and data collection process. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about what it takes. We at Clickvoyant have got this GA4 implementation down to a science. And for most sites with typical complexities, forms, navigation, maybe a mobile versus desktop experience, this can get done in 30 days if you have the right kind of talent and focus on the project. So you first want to start out with evaluating all the existing GA3 goals and events. That really becomes this requirements doc. I'm sure more than the majority of you have a lot of data in your Google Analytics 3 account that probably is a little outdated and you don't really need anymore. So this is a good time to start to account for what you have and what you actually need going forward. Then you move into documenting what are the triggers that send the data into the systems. Is it the form view? Is it a form interaction and then form submit? Then you'll know, okay, this is the data we need. These are the actions that actually trigger that data. That will go into a document that is your tagging schema. Thereafter, you will start to map your goals in GA to what is now a conversion event in GA4. To say, okay, in GA3, this is what this was called, and in GA4, this is where it will be. So now we're moving from the goals system to a conversion event system because GA4 is event-based. Once you've created that documentation, you could take a look and see inside your HTML and CSS structures, what are the things that we can use existing on the site to trigger that thing? Is it a button click to a CTA? Is there a value inside that CTA button click that allows me to trigger that button? That will help you alleviate some of the work off of developers. Start figuring out these are the data that we need that require developer work, working within a data layer. These are the triggers that don't require developer work. All right, so step number 6 is document data layer requirements. So first of all, what is a data layer? A data layer is the bit of code that passes through the browser that can be shared between Google Analytics, Klaviyo, Shopify, Pinterest, Facebook tags. It is work that a developer has to do, however. So if you want to level up things that users do that say they've watched this video or they've downloaded this white paper or they've looked at this particular form, if there are parameters that you want to pass, for example, form name, how far they got down a form, if you have a multi-page form, what page it is, those are things that are typically pushed into the browser via a data layer for then Google Analytics or Facebook tags or Google Media tags will then pick up. So it is usually things that are not found in your CSS or HTML that a developer will have to custom code. So that is not work that anybody else can do, not a marketer, not an analyst, not a tagging architect, just the developer who works on the website. And step number 7 is when all of that is complete, you have your documentation for how I want to architect all of this data. I have the documentation for how to create the triggers, what data layer requirements are needed. Now I go into Google Tag Manager to basically set up all of those tags. So it's not different GA3 where you go in and say, these are the tags for Facebook, the triggers, and all these events in GA. What is new is step 8. Not only do you use Tag Manager to throw the data to GA, now you have to go into GA and make sure you set up the catcher's mitt. So essentially, all the tags that you used to make in GA3 via Google Tag Manager would just go in and Google Analytics 3 would know exactly where to put that data. Now, Google Analytics 4 has to be told, okay, I've set up all these tags, custom dimensions, and parameters inside Google Tag Manager. Now, here's where to put it in GA. And that is why an implementation for Google Analytics 4 not only is more complicated, but does take longer. So now that we've talked about how the data actually gets into Google Analytics 4, let's talk a little bit about what she looks like. So I'm pulling up ClickVoyance data here, nothing to hide about what we're doing, but one of the things that you will notice right away in Google Analytics 4 is that there are really not a ton of calculations. And by calculations, I mean most of the data that you see here is a straight up count of things. New users by direct, no conversion rates by channel group. You can see countries. You can see user activity over time and the infamous events that you can see. So now in engagement, the way to view an event-based system is to primarily go here into events. So now what you can see is all of these events, scroll, page, click, non-tag, they're all here together. You can see page views under pages and screens, but it's not as clean as when you walked into your model home of GA3. So if you want to know an example for events, what people were doing, like what specific pages were people looking at, what specific forms or calls to action people were clicking on, you're going to have to add new parameters here. So a marketer is going to be required to know how to get in here and analyze the data and know how the data is architected so that they can get their data out. So for example, with all these event names, if I want to know what pages these are on, I would go in here, I would search for pages, and then you could use this page path or page URL. And then you can see all of these different pages that people are looking at. But a problem is like, I can't just look at page view. Now you're going to have to know, oh, I want to filter only for the page view and look at that. Or say I only want to look at things that have a form on it, and then I can look at form name for submit form. So there is a lot of activity that Google is now asking its marketers to do, primarily working in this new tab, which is the exploration tab. So you have your reports where all the link and log data is just there available to you to just kind of peek around, and maybe you could do some filters on these reports. But to do real data explorations and answering some of your questions, Google wants you to go here to the Explore tab. So the basic way to think about this is almost like if you've ever used Data Studio, then this is now Data Studio within the Google Analytics 4 interface. I will caveat that and say anything that you make in here is shareable, but you cannot work on it as a team. So let me show you an example of what is in the explorations. The way you have to build these out is, all my data is available in GA4. Now I need to, if I want to do a device type analysis, I have to add the data that I need here for the device type analysis. So you have to know what a dimension is. Dimensions are the things that describe metrics. In this case, I'm looking for mobile devices or device types. So here, I'm going to choose device category and I'm going to import that. And then the metrics that I want to see these are things that you can count. I want to see total users. I want to see returning users and new users. And maybe I want to see sessions, which is now available. in GA4, which was not previously. So now I'm going to import that. This area for the variables tab is basically saying, this is the data that I want to use. Then you go into your tab settings and say, now these are the things that I want to analyze and this is how I want to see it. So now let's choose a bar chart. And now I'm going to drop my metrics in here. So I want the values to be total users, and I want the values to be sessions, and I want that to be broken down by the device category. And now you'll be able to see. Again, Google Analytics does require you to have some vocabulary for how data is architected and how dashboards are built to be able to get the questions out that you used to be able to answer in GA3. Now you have to go in and kind of self-serve in GA4. So it is a bear to understand. I recommend in the transition is to create the insight system. So what I mean by that is say when you have data inside Google Analytics 4, you're not done. Getting the data out is going to be as much of a culture shift as getting the data in. And so the insight system is really understanding that analytics is a team. So number one, what I would first do is catalog all the roles and responsibilities dependent on GA4. Okay, we have email, we've got marketing automation, we have website design and user experience, we have CRO, and we have media. List out what are the things that they have to access every day that they typically get out of GA3. That's step number one. Step number two, collect the minimum requirements because learning GA4 is going to be like learning a new language. Figure out what do I minimally need to understand for each of these roles and have them work inside GA4 to get that data out. Third, assign the dashboard build for the minimum viable reporting. Now, you don't want to have your marketing strategy, media, UX team going in here, digging into Google Analytics every day, trying to figure it out. It will be a time suck. If there is an opportunity or you have access to a person who can build a dashboard, try to get that done so that there can be a quick reference guide for that digital marketing discipline as they're learning how to get into GA4 themselves. And fourth, form a committee to research all of the different AIs that are available post-GPT world. These AIs, automations, automated dashboards are coming out of the woodwork to try to help humans be more superhuman. And so because the GA4 data architecture is conducive to those kind of things, there are a ton of other products coming out that might be useful to your specific use case. And then finally, measure the engagement with the analytics practice. So as a director of analytics, I used to put pixels on the dashboards that I would create, and invariably the open rates on the dashboard were only the day of Mia presenting the dashboard and the insights presentation every month. Throughout the month, nobody was engaged with the product. So creating a system for knowing if people are using data to support their roles will help you understand the success of the transition. All right, so we talked about some nitty-gritty steps to help get the team moving on Google Analytics 4, but here are some change management considerations. So one of the biggest risks is that people just don't find it very useful. I think that's very fair given the user experience, but the data in there is undeniably rich. And so what I would do is establish how everybody uses data in the company in general and make sure that whether you're doing it with dashboards or a report inside Google Analytics 4, that you make something invaluable that somebody has to go to all the time. If you know a marketer who's going to Google Analytics, they usually have their three go-tos. Oh, I go there and I check bounce rate, I check conversion rates for new versus returning. Well, if that's what's important to that marketer, make sure they know how to get to that space. Second, we're dialing into, improving the user adoption. So obviously, if you know how somebody's going to use Google Analytics, improving the user adoption is based on giving them that valuable knowledge. Developing the tribal knowledge is going to be key. If you work together as a team sport, you'll get through it faster versus if everybody's left alone trying to click their way around GA4. Join a GA4 task committee or learning committee or a social media group dedicated to the subject. There's a lot of people in the industry starting to share outcomes, and a lot of interesting tricks are being done to get to the old data that you used to be able to get in GA3 that you can't get at GA4. And then finally, enhance the resiliency within the company. So I asked my LinkedIn network why people think that the uptake on GA4 is so slow. Why have only 30% of websites migrated over? And I get answers like, it sucks. I really hate the user experience. We just switched to something else. We switched to Matomo. And suffice it to say, this is absolutely the wrong attitude. Embracing this tech and having a positive mental attitude are really critical to success. So ask yourself, like, why is this different? Get curious about why Google has done this. And that will lead to better understanding of the power of GA4. In addition, no other analytic software is really going to be a magic bullet. All the other products that I hear people going to are pretty inferior to what Google has provided you. And, I'm saying this like I'm not even a Google Analytics partner, but as a data analytics senior professional. What you have at your fingertips is an enterprise ready tool if you just, put in the time and put in the reps to get to understand it. So, this has been a lot to cover on Google Analytics 4. I do have Ask an Analytics Director office hours every Thursday. Feel free to hit me up about any of it. I think collectively, as a marketing industry, this is a big change for us. And so the more we can stick together, talking about how it's different, talking about the benefits of it, and helping each other get through the transition, the easier the transition will be. And when we come out the other side, I guarantee it's going to be a smarter world. Thank you so much for your time.